Hi, it's Dr. Noel Williams, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Optimal Health Associates. It's 2 days past Cuatro de Cinco. For those of you who watch Arrested Development, Mexican Independence Day, as I said, which really isn't what happens on Cinco de Mayo. But I didn't know that, and I'm ethnocentric by accident, so as an American. So to me, it's Cinco de Mayo is always going to be Mexican independence, but I do want to point out that I was completely incorrect, technically, on that. So let's talk about COVID. We're mostly going to talk about pandemic tonight, which is a kind of a political info commercial about possible conspiracy stuff with COVID. So the question we'll want to try to ask and answer a little, is it conspiracy? Is it incompetence? What's going on? But first we'll go over some general numbers. About 3.2 million in the world have COVID, 1.2 in the United States, 4,000 in Oklahoma. About 260,000 deaths in the world, 73,000 in the U.S., 238 in Oklahoma. So one of the first things to be aware of, COVID is a real disease. It really does kill people. It's not killing just old people, but old people shouldn't have to die too. So for all the people who think there's this huge conspiracy that switching the numbers around or doing all of that, for every COVID patient that might have not really died from COVID, there's probably 2 or 3 patients in nursing homes and older people at home who die from COVID who aren't recorded. So just figure it balances out. And so don't look at it like that. It's not a giant conspiracy. Doctors aren't in it for a conspiracy. They see real nice people coming in who slowly die horrible deaths. So it's not like that. There's no conspiracy in the medical community to make COVID worse than it is. Number 2, let's talk about payment. And this comes up in the video, and this is one of the errors in the video. No physicians are making money on COVID. When you see the hospital payment system or the DRG, diagnostic related group, that's a fixed payment from Medicare, and then insurances pay off that level. And so if it's a COVID patient, it's about $13,000, and if they go on an event, it's $34,000. So, ventilator patients get paid more even if it's not COVID. But the thing is, no physicians are making money, and let's get this through our heads. Every hospital in the United States is getting devastated right now and across the world, because what do hospitals really want to do? Do they want to take care of sick COVID patients who need tons of drugs that are super expensive? One dose of alpha interferon or beta interferon is like $4,000 or $5,000, and it's not like a la carte with Medicare where you go, oh, I'll charge them more and you get more money. So they're getting killed financially on these patients. And then what they really make money on, which is orthopedic and neurosurgery, and then general surgery, GYN surgery, like what I do, and ENT, none of that has happened in 6 weeks, and only limited amounts are being done in a lot of places. So all these hospitals have lost tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. In places like MD Anderson is going to lose a couple $1 billion by the end of the year, Mayo Clinic will. MD Anderson's going to lose probably close to $1 billion. So there's going to be bankruptcies. This is not a good thing for medicine. We don't want this. The hospitals don't want it. The administrators don't want it. The laundry people who work there, the clerical staff, the people who've all died taking care of these patients don't want it. So get that out of your head. There's not some money thing here. Now, is there some pressure to skew the data? Who knows? But again, not a really valid criticism. The other thing that, as we get going into the video, that's a little bit out of whack is the idea, I'm thinking of the most polite way of saying this, the idea that those 2 doctors in Bakersfield who went on about immunology had any clue about what they were talking about. And the same 2 I kind of strongly criticized a few days ago, who talked about immunology and how your immune system goes down the tube if you wash your hands too much or wear a mask, which is not true. There's innate immunity, what you have normally, and adaptive immunity when you make antibodies to something. And so the problem with COVID is, since we've never gotten it, when we get it, we're going to get sick, okay? Or we have a good immune system and we're not going to get sick. So, but everyone's going to go through that process. And some people will die and some people won't. And the ones who don't die will get a level of immunity from the COVID virus. But right now, we don't want everyone to run out and get it because it kills a lot of people. And it may only, in the end, kill 1% of the population, but 1% of the population in the United States is a lot of people. It's 3 million people. So you don't want that to happen. You have to have it organized. So I won't go into that whole thing again. But those are kind of the two central issues I have with the video that are just completely wrong. They're completely wrong. So then let's talk about what's potentially right. But before we do that, let's talk about Judy Mikovits. She's a virologist, PhD, was at the National Cancer Institute, left and did some other stuff. Along the way, something went wrong in Nevada. She said she was set up by big pharma operatives and things. The police reports are not reflective of that, but if big pharma set her up, they wouldn't be. But what actually seems to happened was she went home with some lab equipment that she wasn't supposed to and gotten some tissue samples she wasn't supposed to and returned them, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden she got arrested and charged. And I don't know if there will ever be any light at the end of that tunnel of knowing what actually happened. And then number two, she had promoted a theory about a viral infection for chronic fatigue syndrome, and it appeared to monkey with her data in a publication that had been made in the journal Science, which is an extremely prestigious journal, and eventually it had to be retracted and because it wasn't reproducible, and there were some clear questions about what had gone on in her lab. She eventually did a few more studies that were published, and the final study showed that her first study was in fact incorrect, but that then put just this pall over her whole career, and it really pretty much essentially destroyed her career, and she became kind of a little bit out there in terms of criticizing viruses. But so you just have to remember that as a source person, there's credibility issues. But let's look at what some of the things she said, and just see, is this wrong or is this right, or what the video brought up. First, she brought up a very valid point that there aren't any vaccines for RNA viruses, so COVID's an RNA virus. She did bring up alpha interferon and how important that is. If you've been watching my videos, alpha interferon is really important. Why? Because you can effectively raise it with zinc. And if your zinc levels are low, it's going to go up by about 1,000%. If they're lower normal, it's going to go up a bunch too. The only thing that was shown in China to treat kids were shots of alpha interferon. So what's the obvious conclusion when we look at all the zinc data? That zinc's toxic to coronavirus and all RNA viruses and many DNA viruses. It directly reinforces your innate immune system and raises the alpha interferon. Why doesn't the government mention that, or a natural choice? Very strange. We're focusing on a vaccine effort that has never been successful in the history of mankind so far. Instead, we're not focusing on things we know that work. Then we look at Plaquenil, which they mention. Plaquenil, they reference a survey of physicians from several weeks ago. It was about 2,500. That Plaquenil was the most effective treatment. This last Sunday, CIRMO, a research survey group for medicine, had data on 6,500 pulmonologists, critical care, and hospitalists who take care of COVID patients. And the single most effective medicine was Plaquenil. So then that begs the question again, which they bring up, which they kind of talk about vaguely in the video, bring it up, is why aren't we doing research on that? If it's the single most effective thing across the world, everyone's saying it, why will the FDA under the NIH and under Dr. Fauci only support doing research on Plaquenil for seriously ill or critically ill patients, and not early use or preventive use, which is where all the data shows the best benefit? Because if you were really a scientist, and these people were really scientists there and not had some ulterior motive, which you have to really wonder about, which I've mentioned, Answer the question. I mean, it would be easy to recruit 500 patients in a double-blinded trial at the first positive COVID test and put half of them on placebo and half of them on Plaquenil, and see what happens. They won't do it, even though there's data that shows it works. Rather, they say in public, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. You're a criminal if you do it practically as your doctor, which is utter bullshit, because by their own FDA guidelines, I can prescribe any medicine that's FDA approved for any use I deem scientifically appropriate. The American Medical Association intimated they may go after people's medical licenses for prescribing Plaquenil. That's true. I mean, it's for COVID. It's just, so that part is very true. Then the other part that's very true is this Biddle legislature that allows people like Dr. Fauci to get a cut of the patent money for anything that he gets involved in patents, which, he's very well established as having the most publications of practically any U.S. scientists, and he's at some points been in any given year between the 5th to the 10th most published person in the world. And he's gotten on lots of patents, and so he gets money. And so you start looking at things like that activity, his lack of any interest in things we know would work, or doing any research to support easy things like nutrition. And you start seeing that pattern in what they're presenting, and it gets concerning. So you then have to think, is it just they're all willfully incompetent at the FDA, CDC, NIH, to have let the virus get from China when it was obvious it was going on? They had tons of reports, and Dr. Fauci spent all of December, January, and most of February, really through the 20th to 25th, doing nothing to prevent it from getting here. Is that incompetence, or is that willful neglect to achieve an agenda? I begin to wonder a little. I mean, they show a clip of him saying in 2017 at a commencement, I believe it was a commencement address, saying, "Get ready, a pandemic's coming. We're going to have a pandemic from a virus. Be ready." Well, where were you, Dr. Fauci? You weren't ready. You missed the call then. That video of you saying that, I think it was at Georgetown, and then this comes, and you willfully blew it off. You did everything in your power to dismiss it, with diminishing even the failed people at the CDC who started to get on board that it was going to come, advising every other group it wasn't going to happen, doing nothing to prepare. And so that's all part of the video. And so you see this pattern that they're presenting in the video where, yeah, there's been a lot of concerning inaction and actions, active actions to block the research on things that are inexpensive and very safe, and then actions to promote, we're going to do a vaccine when there's never been a vaccine against an RNA virus. So it really starts adding up that there's something off. Is it just global incompetence, which is what I was thinking, but it always seemed odd to me that Fauci had done so badly. Is there some other agenda where we just do not want anything that isn't a big money event for pharmaceutical companies or Bill Gates' vaccine foundation? And so I think the thing to watch will be what happens with the Israeli antibody. Is figuring out the only thing that the most successful treatment for COVID right now is plasma infusions from people who've gotten better. And now that we have an antibody from that plasma that's been identified as the workhorse, it's been cloned and can really knock out the virus right away, that's phenomenal, and that's great news. But it's an Israeli product. It's not an FDA-generated patent, and so it's not going to come through any of our companies, and none of our big scientists are going to get it. So let's call it a year from now and see how much progress, or how easy was it for that antibody to get approved here, since there's no money in it for American companies and the American medical establishment in terms of the industrial medical establishment at the FDA, CDC, and NIH. So that's really the summary on the video. A couple little errors, but definitely a persistent grain of truth on actions at FDA, CDC, NIH, with Fauci all in the center of it. I don't know enough about what went on with the HIV things to know if what she said was true or untrue, that he tried to steal her research and did things like that. I don't think any of us will ever know. I think the pattern is what you always have to watch in anything when you're trying to solve a puzzle. And the puzzle is, why did they fail so badly? And why do they continue to ignore obvious treatment options that are super safe and effective, and instead are focusing on rather expensive medications with effects, and then wanting billions and billions of dollars to go into research on vaccines? Think about it. Billions and billions of dollars. Just like when the military needs billions of dollars to develop a new airplane. We need billions and billions of dollars to develop these vaccines, and the government, being terrified of what's going on, just releases all that money to people like Dr. Fauci, who then runs the show and picks who's going to become extremely successful and rewarded and who isn't, because he handpicks where the money goes. He's no fool. He understands. So that would be the summary of the article. A lot of stuff in it, very interesting, thought-provoking, with just a little bit of political nonsense to try to get people thinking there's more of a conspiracy about finances and immunology type stuff. Final note, the Swedes came out today. Anders Tegnell, their head epidemiologist, and said, they were really shocked that they have all these dead people there and that their death rate's so high, and he was apologetic about it and said they did not anticipate their open society thing going quite as awry as it did, and they're reevaluating. And the thing that's so interesting about that is the World Health Organization, as I said 4 days ago, called them out as the best success story, when obviously they were doing terrible. And so the World Health Organization may think they're doing great, but the Swedish government and public health authority has basically said, we screwed up and we're not doing great and this is a disaster. So just a thought that, again, the World Health Organization is political and not honest either. But I do want to give them credit, because they did come up with the vaccine, with the one test for COVID that was simple and easy to use and pretty accurate, unlike what we've completely failed to do here in the United States. So the World Health Organization, through the Germans, did come up with one positive. So I want to throw them a bone. Anyway, that's it. Good night. Sorry it came out late, but the first one was technical difficulties. It was all scratchy, and Kim said that was actually the best one I have done, or one of them, but of course that one's gone forever. So good night. Thanks.